Hello everyone. Over the past several years, Ritchie Bros has been making the transition from a traditional auctioneer to a global marketplace for insights, services, and transaction solutions. Today, we'd like to show you how Ritchie Bros can help you better understand the value of your fleet through our RB Asset Valuator tool and our Rouse appraisal service offering. First, let's talk about RB Asset Valuator. This is a tool we introduced to the market a couple of years ago to help you navigate the transaction history of Ritchie Bros and all of our marketplaces. We know as a public company and one of the largest repositories of construction, transportation, agriculture, equipment pricing data in the world, we know many of you come to our websites and search our auction results to try to kind of understand the value of your equipment. Well, by introducing the tool, we actually made it a lot easier for you to do that. Basically, this is a one-stop shop, right? One place you can go and you can see results from live auctions. You can see results from Iron Planet online auctions. You can see results from Marketplace E, and you can actually see current pricing from our listing marketplaces on Ritchie List and Mascus. So an easy to use tool, log in, basically do simple searches, right? Make, model, year, and we bring you back a range of prices in an easy to understand format, right? No more needing to pick through auction results using the search results on our various websites. You have all our transactions right there in one easy to use place. And we actually kind of give you the information in a very, very digestible format with averages and price ranges all built into the tool. The beauty of this tool is these are actual results from Ritchie Bros and our various and all of our brands. These are actual transactions. As a public company, right, we have to stand behind these transactions. So you know that this is what the market is bringing for this particular piece of equipment on this particular day in this particular region, right there. And you can even click through and see that, so you can see the photos, you can see that, ascertain the condition of that equipment, all right at your fingertips to give you the quickest and easiest way to start to understand the value of your fleet. To get started, it's very easy. Just go to rbasset-solutions.com, click on the link for the Asset Valuator. It's free to sign up. It takes a couple of seconds, and boom, you're on your way. You can bookmark the site, come back to it, and check your equipment. I'd like to introduce Rafi from Rouse, and we're going to talk about another form of asset pricing, and that's called an appraisal.
Hello, Matt, and hello, everybody. Thank you for having me today. My name is Rafi Aharonian. My role is Managing Director of Appraisal Services within Rouse, the broader Rouse umbrella. And just on that point, Matt, a little bit of background about Rouse. Started out, when we got involved with this data and information services realm, it really started out around underpinning the value of equipment, using actual transaction data across multiple channels of sale, auction sales, retail end user sales via private transaction, in many cases, wholesaler dealers type sales, using these transactions to house a database of transaction comps and lean into that for purposes of valuation, having a lot of automation and automated valuation around that. And from there sprouted out sort of one of the pillars of Rouse that we all know today, which is appraisal services.
So Rafi, why would someone need an appraisal?
We're providing appraisals of equipment to support whether it's a collateral for a loan, so some sort of bank or financially driven need. In many cases today, we're providing appraisals for contractors who are contemplating buying and selling equipment, managing generations amongst themselves and transitioning owners, partnership buyouts, etc. From time to time, those appraisals support some sort of an M&A transaction. Sometimes there's residual value needs. All of that good stuff fits into our appraisal business.
Hey, Rafi, can you walk us through, what are the use cases for an appraisal?
It's interesting. The use cases, seem to be quite expansive, and we find that there's any number of reasons why someone might need to know the worth of their equipment. And a lot of times what's interesting, I think, for most people to find out is that there's not one single answer to that question. Depending on how you're using it or how you might be selling it or where you might be selling it, the answer might cover a broad range of valuation outcomes that we're equipped to support and articulate as we work with collectively all of our customers. When you sort of get down to it, you could probably torture the details across all of that range of outcomes that you can get. But to simplify, you can think about how quickly you might be looking to sell something, where you might be willing to sell it, what your sort of time horizon and pricing expectations are, what sort of equipment collateral you have in front of you, the marketability of that. All of those things might come into play when we think about that appraisal value. And so for that reason, or for that being one of the many reasons, to your point, there's not one and only one way of considering an appraisal value for an asset.
So tell us, Rafi, what types of assets can you appraise?
Great question. And I'll tell you, in the 1 year that I've been now part of the Ritchie Brothers family, as I interact with our collective network across the organization, that this question comes up quite a lot. And I'll give you sort of a two-part answer to that. The first way that I always like to answer that is to sort of say, look, if it's equipment that we normally see transacting through the Ritchie Brothers channels, be it the traditional unreserved auction, through Marketplace E, through the Iron Planet sales, if it's equipment that you're seeing normally transact through those channels, you could probably check the box next to that and say that's something that's going to fit well within our core capabilities. So to really simplify it, those are sort of the parameters that I would put around it. But then if we're getting more specific, you're going to hear, it's all the key sort of equipment products that you might be familiar with. Your heavy earth moving, your compact or your small and medium earth moving, aerial and telehandlers, material handling, agricultural equipment, truck tractors and trailers. That's a question we get a lot where, we've now got what I think is the richest set of transaction data for trucks and trailers by way of some data partnerships that we've established across the industry. And then extending beyond that, into the crane space, mining, oil and gas, energy related assets. And then beyond that, even some more specialized assets like some of the vocational trucks, boom and buckets, things of that nature. So a pretty wide grab there, but hopefully sort of the easy thing to remember is if it's stuff that we sell, it's probably stuff
we can appraise. Yep. How do you decide what an asset is worth, and what's the methodology for doing that?
So there ends up being a pretty complete process all around that. I think without a doubt, there's always the upfront sort of exploratory discussions that'll take place to understand what's needed and when is it needed by, really setting up the scope, right? So there's the scope establishment component of that we'll go through. Along with that, of course, we'll look to sign up with an engagement letter so that all the terms are agreed and clear for all parties. And then from there, we really begin executing that work. And that execution of that work will include some form of obtaining the asset details or the asset information. Sometimes, in many instances, that comes by way of an equipment listing that we're provided that contains all the necessary details. In other instances, we might go out on site and actually collect those details ourselves with our team of inspectors. But ultimately, it's about getting in hand really good quality information about the descriptive details of the assets in question, the condition of those assets when applicable or when required, the inspection results, and then our team will go through and appraise all of those assets per the value premises that we've set out, with ultimately the final product being sort of two components: an actual bound appraisal report with a narrative of the work that was performed and a summary of the findings, and then an Excel detailed sheet that lists out all the items that were included with the respective values for each individual item.
How long does an appraisal typically take?
Might take different time horizons when you think about what are the ingredients that are going into it and how complex is it. How much back and forth might there need to be? And so as we scrub away sort of any of the friction in that process, you might get to varying degrees of duration. And generally speaking, on the shorter end, we see some things that might be turned as quickly as 5 to 10 days. And for some of the more complex projects, you're pushing up closer to a month's timeline to get everything turned around.
Rafi, how much does an appraisal typically cost?
It's one of those things where it's a function of the nature of the work that's being performed and how extensive it is. And you end up seeing quite a wide range. And, I think in the past, we've shared some parameters around this with some of the folks that might be interested. But generally speaking, on the low end of the range, you're probably looking at something between $2,000 and $5,000 for something that's a little bit of a shorter list, a shorter burn, that might be very straightforward. And then as you scale up in terms of the level of complexity, the number of assets and so on, the average fees might exceed $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 for that appraisal, particularly when you start considering a pretty comprehensive scope of inspections where we're sending folks on site to really get under the hood and get really intimate with all the equipment. That time and cost, of course, creeps up with the scope of those appraisals.
What does the appraisal report look like?
That's a great question, because that does sort of speak to the menu of different appraisal offerings, and you really get into the depth of that offering where, in some cases that report is intended to be really robust and fit and conform with what we call the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice. The shorthand USPAP is what they call it. So when you get into that USPAP conformity style of report, the level of depth might increase and be a little bit richer in content. And that's really intended to go into the hands of folks who might be using it for an underwriting purpose, a big transaction that they might be doing. They want to know that that's gone through the rigor that anybody in the appraisal industry would expect out of that. And so there's a little bit of a richer scope and content that shows up there. And in other cases, in many cases, actually, we get the instances where we get a single owner that says, hey, I got this equipment. I just want to get the appraisals for my internal uses. And I might not need all that extra, the frills, but tell me what my equipment's worth. And you might get a scaled down report as an end product as a result. Nonetheless, the end values that are delivered are going to be of the similar caliber, regardless of which report is ordered.